One can say that when you were speaking about earlier, the legality of all of this, and that issue we will come to later. One thing that seems to be pretty obvious is that law, specifically international law, has been thrown out of the window in this new year of 2026. You mentioned the kidnapping of a president, a sovereign president, that is Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela. That's the even before this direct intervention, the soft intervention in Iran, where many of the protesters there, supported by Mossad, CIA, MI6, who even bragged about it. So one thing that we should be clear about is that unfortunately, international law is being contravened left, right, and center, especially by the United States, which, of course, for the past since World War II, presented itself as the defender. I mean, many of these international legal documents, it was. Well, many of them it wrote itself. So we're seeing is the unmasking moment of all of these kind of liberal pretenses to kind of human rights, democracy, upholding the UN Charter, especially Article 2, which prevents illegal aggression. And so, brother, this is what we have been seeing so far. And of course, its culmination now is this massive, terrorist assault against Iran. So we've not started out on a very positive note in this year.
Well, certainly. And let's just get Prof. Dr. Ahmed Harun's take on this. Clearly, Dr. Harun, we know that from a legality perspective, this is not a lawful self-defense because this is an armed attack on Iran. This was not authorized by world organizations like the United Nations Security Council as well. But again, when one looks at all the issues that are playing out, whether we're talking about preventive disarmament of Iran and its nuclear stockpile, whether we're talking about counterterrorism, whether we're talking about regime change. Now, all of these constitute one thing from a legal point of view, international crime of aggression.
Yeah, of course, in my opening salvo would be pretty much that, international law is dead. In fact, I argue that it's never been alive to begin with. It was never conceived to protect those in the global south. It was the liberal institutional order as we know it was conceived after the World War II. And we know that the World War II was primarily a Western war. And after the Holocaust, they needed to come up with a international system that would prevent any future genocide of white Europeans. We know the Holocaust primarily was a genocide of white Europeans in Germany and surrounding countries. So international law was never meant to protect the rights or the likes of the Iranians or the Venezuelans or the Iraqis and so on. And, you asked the question at the beginning, is there a link between these issues, Venezuela, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and now Iran? And I'll argue to some extent there is, because perhaps the Americans wanted to ensure that there's enough oil supply in the market, because now they're pretty much controlling the oil supply of Venezuela and so on, and who it's being sold to, and so on. So there is pretty much a link to this. Of course, oil price has shot up quite exponentially, but that is likely, we don't know which way that's going to turn in the next few weeks and months ahead. So what we're seeing is, the undressing of the international order. The international order as we know it, I know many are desperate to cling to it. International order, especially a country like South Africa, is desperate to cling to the liberal institutional order, perhaps multilateralism as a cornerstone of liberal institutional order. But I would think it's naive to say so, and we need to start imagining an alternative world order.
Well, certainly. And also, I think let's just bring Taufeeq into the discussion. Taufeeq, I know you've written extensively already on what has been playing out, and it is clear that Iran did not attack the United States or Israel prior to these strikes. And we've seen this act of force, which is completely unjustified as well. And again, there are many international law experts that are also talking about there is sufficient grounds to believe that the attacks against Iran amount to nothing but a crime of aggression.
A way to pick up on what you all had to say before me, and what actually stood out is the failure of international law and the United Nations. You see, the United Nations is a toothless body. It's basically a body that's put into place with the imbalance of veto powers. So basically, you've got the USA, Israel, which actually vetoed peace in countries like Africa and stuff. So we must make a note of that there as a failure of international law and take the United Nations as being redundant. Then I think it was Professor Junaid that actually mentioned something about the petrol price and stuff like that there. You see, if we go down to the 1950s, we have to go to the establishment of the petrodollar system. And if we understand the history and the establishment of the petrodollar system and how it infiltrated the Middle East, we will now understand the economic war and economic factors at play that's causing this division in the Muslim world. So yeah, we must reflect on that.
Well, certainly. Also, Prof. Junaid, I think one of the most important things, and this was a statement that was also made by Donald Trump, and he talks about an imminent attack by Iran. Now, clearly, there has been absolutely no evidence whatsoever of an imminent attack or even a preemptive strike as far as Iran is concerned. And just looking at it legally and from an international law perspective as well, in terms of how imminence or an imminent attack is actually understood according to international law.
Right. And I think that we should welcome this as perhaps the first statement by the Trump administration, even trying to make an argument from international law. One recognizes this when Marco Rubio all of a sudden invokes the term imminent. And so now they're trying to give it somewhat of a legal veneer, although, like I said, they really do not care about these things. And this is, in fact, the conundrum that we face, is that we are really literally dealing with a Trump administration. I mean, put Israel to the side, that has never believed in anything of international law, whatever toothless UN resolutions that have been, and they're numerous, sanctioning Israel. Nothing has ever been done about that. But we also now have this Trump administration, which also, makes no pretense of living up to international law. And so when we're talking about this, the worst crime, according to the Nuremberg principles, the crime of aggression, it's just taking place in front of our eyes. And in some ways, this is just the next step after the genocide in Gaza, something all of us know, live streamed in front of us, every single international aspect of international law violated daily, and nothing was done about it. And I think that this is a continuation of that process. And in some ways, these are the last gasps. I know this is difficult to swallow, but these do seem like the last gasps of the project of both Zionism and the American empire coming to an end. Now, again, that process can be 2 years, it can be 20 years, and so on. But we do see this very flagrant violation of all these international laws and basically doing whatever it takes to entrench the Zionism and empire in the region being implemented in front of our eyes. And it doesn't seem like people, any of the nation states at least, are willing to confront it. In fact, the opposite is happening. Once something like this goes into motion, no matter how much, for example, the Gulf regimes said, well, we were telling them not to do this. This was going to destabilize everything. The Trump administration goes ahead with it. And then it seems like everyone, once again, becomes quite complicit in what's going on.
Well, certainly. And also, I think, Dr. Jazbhay, when one looks at the modus operandi, and one can actually draw a lot of parallels with what has taken place in Gaza, where initially, when the genocide had started as well, and we see the how Iran is being targeted as well, brutally in many sense of the word, taking out leadership. We've seen this. We've seen that happen with Hamas. We've seen that with the assassination and the killing of Ismail Haniyeh and the other leaders in Hamas. We've seen some of the leadership that were killed in Lebanon as well. We see the modus operandi exactly the same. Ayatollah Khamenei as well, and also his family. So we are seeing a trend and also parallels that one can actually draw between what took place in Gaza and what is now playing out in Iran. And over and above that, not only taking out the leadership, but also we've seen what has happened with the school, that hundred and somewhat young little children that were killed, hospitals that come under attack as well. So a lot of similarity in what we see in these acts of aggression taking place.
Yes, of course, we're dealing with the same enemy here. The Gaza genocide was a genocide perpetrated by Israel, supported primarily by the United States of America and its Western allies. Now, we see this aggression in Iran started off by the Israelis and the Americans, now supported by the French, supported quietly by the Gulf Arab nations and so on. So it's the same modus operandi. And targeting leadership, as you rightfully pointed out, it seems that it's as if they never learned the lesson from Iraq in 2003 to the various assassination of Hamas leaders, starting with Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, Abdul Aziz Al-Tisi, Ismail Haniya, Yahya Sinwar, and so on. It's the same modus operandi. It's assumed that you deal with the leadership, that the resistance would die out. And we've seen it in Gaza, we've seen it in Iraq, we've seen it in Gaza, and so on. It never dies out. And the same principle applies in Iran. I mean, the Ayatollah Khomeini knew that he was a target. He knew he was a target that he didn't even bother, going into a bunker when he was told to move to a safer place, because he said that if he goes in the bunker, 90 million other Iranians don't have that luxury of going into a bunker. So he stood firm. So going after leadership has never proven to be a successful way of conducting warfare by Israel and the Americans. Yet they continue with this. So whoever comes in after Khomeini, whoever even if the current president is assassinated, whoever comes in after that, the resistance continues against the Israeli and American entities. We know that that Iran is the last bastion of resistance to this greater Israel project, that is spoken about, and which Mike Huckabee, the ambassador of the US to Israel, spoke about. And he said that if Israel had taken the entire Middle East, that would be fine. So all these issues are related. And ultimately, this is about furthering the agenda of Israel and its greater Israel project.
Well, certainly. And also, I think think let's, Taufeeq, when one looks at the arguments that have been presented, the scattershot arguments, particularly by somebody like Donald Trump, where he talks about freedom for the Iranian people, and we know they encourage the demonstrators to take over government buildings. They promise them a way out. They even had the son of the Shah of Iran at one point in time prepared to take over, which obviously Trump later on backtracked on. But again, what this tells us that the international law is thrown out of the window, and it is more like embracing military power, because again, its reliance on brute force of the US military power together with the likes of Israel, the Zionist entity of Israel, to promote this global agenda that is playing out.
Okay, based on what you're saying, I'd actually like to. I'm not too sure which actually Pan Africanist leader it was, but he said that your colonizers will return as investors. So it's basically happening now in fast forward. But you see, this issue of this war is actually all over the place. And I personally would like to actually break it down into the economic factors, the political factors, as well as the social factors at play. And then I'm going to take it one step further into the social factors of giving the religious factors that are influencing. On one hand, you've got the greater Israel agenda. On the other hand, you've got the division between, well, I don't want to actually mention the different texts, but yeah, but people capitalize on all that there, and people like Donald Trump actually used that as leverage in actually causing a destabilization as they actually attempted in Iran actually before this. So we have to like break the issues down and actually, and the last issue with regards to, I think that's a direct reflection of why certain leaders are actually taken out. And as I said, it still goes back to 1950 that causes the whole. If you look at Jordan split, it's more US backed. If you look at, well, basically, in my opinion, the war actually never stopped for the past 50 years. So we have to break it down and look at it in a much more micro glass, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, Taufeeq. But also, I think, Professor Junaid, one obviously needs to measure this against international law versus the rules of war. And I'm not too sure why Prof. Junaid is not on screen. I'm hoping Prof. Junaid, oh, there we go. Prof. Junaid is with us on screen. Just in the context, from the moment the very first strike was launched, would the rules of war apply against international law? Because we've seen what Iran has done. Iran has immediately lashed out against the countries in the Gulf, the striking of the U.S. Military bases and also other strategic targets. So how does one measure up international law versus the rules of war that would apply in a situation like this?
Oh yeah, brother. I mean, the rules of war we've commonly understood as one of the core components of international law in terms of what's there in the Geneva Conventions, the international humanitarian law. Those things are pretty clear, and they're so clear that they also make something else very clear, that Israel and the United States virtually violate every single component of these laws, which is one of the reasons why, beyond the larger accusation of genocide that South Africa brought against Israel in the International Court of Justice. Well, within that accusation, what built the content of that accusation were one violation of the rules of war after another. That's what was going on throughout. And of course, when we speak about aggression, the Nuremberg principles were absolutely clear on this. The ultimate crime is that of aggression, but also all of the crimes that ensue from that initial crime. And so we have seen let's take specifically, obviously, Iran is the country that we're analyzing in terms of its now the war of aggression waged against it. Iran, over the past 2 years, one can go even beyond, And if we can simply walk away and ignore the propaganda that comes from the United States and Israel, the greatest state sponsor of terrorism, so on and so forth, Ali Khamenei, may God bless his soul, was the most evil man, according to President Trump, Mark Rubio, and all of these characters. If you can debunk that propaganda, or at least put it aside, and then realize that Iran has made every single effort, number one, at negotiations, but whenever they have had to engage in any type of military force, say, for example, after the killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani, again, when they responded, they let the American military bases in Iraq know they were going to fire so they could evacuate. The same thing happened when their embassy was bombed, their retaliation. In the 12-day June war in 2025, same thing. They did not attack Israel. They did not attack the United States. Those countries attacked Iran, and then Iran once again went to at the great pains to avoid civilians. And so right now there's a whole bunch of condemnations, as we all know, of the Iranians launching missiles against various Gulf countries. But this is something they have, announced for months, that we have no choice in a situation in which Israel, the United States, is attacking us. And you guys host the American military presence in one capacity or another, we're obviously going to attack them. The U.S. says that, Iran is producing long-range ballistic missiles. Iran says, no, we have no interest in that. We produce these medium-range missiles solely for defense. And then someone like Rubio says, but their missiles can reach our ships. The question is, what are your ships doing there? And so when you're talking about the rules of war, it often seems like the case those countries and leaders most demonized by the empire and Zionism follow those rules of war much, much better than the actual ones, the aggressors, who of course claim that we have designed the international law and rules of war because these other actors are so malignant.
Yes. Also, Dr. Harun, the fact that the other Arab countries, the GCC, the Gulf countries, have now been drawn into this war. And if we want to take a step back, and we know for a very long time, many of us have been talking about these US bases that have been stationed all around the Middle East. And just looking at some of the statements that came out from Donald Trump as well, where it appears, and I think some of the Arab leadership starting to make certain noises hinting at the fact that the United States is not there to protect the Arab interests, but rather it's acting in the interest of Israel. Just how delusional have these Arabs been by allowing America, to have their bases? And now we see how those bases are being targeted, but not only targeted as well, also providing some sort of support to America to try and obviously protect, their interests, their own their interests in terms of both, from a governance perspective, their leadership, protecting the monarchies or the kingdoms, or whatever one can actually call it. Just how delusional have these Arabs been? And I'm sure, in itself, there is a big lesson that, possibly America cannot, definitely America can never, ever be trusted to protect you. If you could unmute your mic, please.
Oh yes, sorry about that. Yes, these GCC countries, all 6 of the GCC countries host American bases, and it was very clear at the beginning that despite their protestation that they would not allow any attacks from their bases, that this war was planned and is being executed from their bases, especially that of the UAE. And all of those GCC countries, their very existence, their illegitimate throne is being is as a direct result of those bases. it was meant to serve as a form of protection, not only against external threats, but also from internal threats as well within their countries. Now, we've seen the Saudi Arabia, there have been some murmurings that, those THAAD, missile defense systems were moved from Saudi Arabia towards Israel to protect Israel. So they are now feeling hard done by, because Riyadh is being attacked, the military bases are being attacked in Riyadh, and these were meant to be a form of protection. Basically those bases are a form of protection money. That these GCC countries pay towards the United States to protect the interests of the Zionist entity. So now there's going to be some hard questions asked internally in these countries, particularly by the citizens of those countries. Even those who are supporters of the regimes, that you pay an arm and a leg for protection from the United States, yet in your hour of need, the Americans didn't protect you. I mean, Saudi Arabia is being hit hard. The Emirates is by far being hit, is being harder. Bahrain, the small entity, which is not too far from Iran, has been hit the hardest, in my opinion. Yet, they host these major bases. So, this war is also exposing the double standards and the hypocrisy of this. Ultimately, it is the interest of Israel. It's always Israel first to the Americans, despite the millions or trillion in the case of Saudi Arabia can pay in terms of investments and so on. It is
Durban, Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust. Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
Ultimately, it's Israel first, and the protection of these GCC countries comes afterwards. If after this war that they cannot ask and answer this difficult question, then ultimately there is no hope for these countries. They either will collapse by the weight of the internal contradictions or the external contradictions. And this is ultimately the hypocrisy that has been exposed by this war to these GCC countries, which I think are going to pay even heavier prices in the days and weeks ahead.
Trust and hope that you're still enjoying the beauty of this month of Ramadan, but a large part of the Muslim Ummah clearly are not, and particularly in the Middle East, considering what is taking place in Iran at this point in time, and also in many other parts around the Muslim world. And clearly there is a lot of concern as to what is happening. And with my guest tonight, Professor Junaid Ahmed, Dr. Ahmed Harun Jazbhay, and Taufeeq Hoosen. Prof. Junaid, just to continue and just to look at it from an Iranian perspective, and it is clear that particularly in the Muslim world, whether we're talking about the Arab world, we're talking about the GCC, the Gulf states, and even countries like Turkey, where Iran is now being perceived as somewhat of a pariah state. And one needs to just understand the justification behind this thought and what do the Arab states or the Muslim world think of Iran right now. We know there has been history. We know what has happened in Syria. We know the support that they had given to Bashar al-Assad as well. And it does appear that this is the discussion, this is the debate that is taking place in Muslim circles. I've seen many a press release, even from scholars, from scholarly bodies, scholarly organizations as well, where to an extent, I think one actually said that one shouldn't be mourning even the death or the murder or the assassination or the killing or martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei as well. Just, how should we be looking at this? Because this is how Iran is perceived from some quarters.
No, absolutely. And I think that we should be distinguishing from what some actors, elite actors, in fact, some you can say in the ulama as well, are claiming that what Iran is, or the Iranian people, or what the Iranian project is, and Ali Khamenei, what he was all about. We have to distinguish that between the way it's actually been received, this war on Iran, and the assassination of Ali Khamenei. And the second part is being viewed by the populations of the Muslim world as a moment of deep mourning, of deep anger and rage, and in fact, a spark for not only within Iran to continue to resist, but outside of Iran as well. I think that this is an old project that obviously began right from the revolution in 1979. That is to say, we often forget that because elite actors at that time, principally the Gulf monarchies, wanted to just portray it as this virulently Shia political revolution that was a threat to all of the other countries that had Sunni majorities, where in fact that was completely not the main reason. The main reason was the Iranian revolution was an anti-monarchical revolution, and that's what obviously all of these Gulf monarchies feared. So at that time, the only way they could deal with this political movement is to basically hype up the sectarian card. Well, these are, horrible Shias, Sahaba hating Shia, all of that nonsense and that propaganda that they try to infuse in their societies. But that we have to remember that original moment really united lots of Sunnis and Shias. In South Africa, no one was looking at it as a sectarian lens, but as a political revolutionary movement against dictatorship. Then in 2006, when the Israelis invaded Lebanon and suffered a horrible defeat at the hands of Hezbollah and their incredible leader, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who was also assassinated. That was another moment. Shias, Sunnis throughout the Muslim world were very much inspired by a movement, Hassan Nasrallah and Hezbollah, largely Shia. And that again frightened the hell out of all of these conservative regimes. And I think that this is another moment. The pariah status, that type of talk that has been imported, obviously, from Washington and Israel and London and so on and so forth. I think that's really collapsed. That narrative has collapsed. And I think that the Israeli genocide in Gaza, it's not only, I think, the populations. Many of the governments also have to kind of are recognizing and articulating this, that the only pariah state really we see in the region is Israel. And we see what it has done and continues to do that actually threatens our rule. We have to remember, for all of their faults, and there's so many, these Gulf regimes also had been, particularly Saudi Arabia, had been on the path of somewhat of a rapprochement facilitated by the Chinese with Iran. So, so the idea that they were gung-ho proponents of this war, I think, is mistaken, despite there's a Washington Post article that said that behind the scenes, MBS was also calling Trump to wage this war. No, I'm not sure if that's true. But the point is, it doesn't make sense for them to be behind a war that, as we are now seeing, is destabilizing all of these countries. And as you said, the military presence in these American military presence is also being exposed for its just absolutely inability or unwillingness to protect these countries. So rather than being a form of protection, the American military presence is like a magnet for outside attack. And I'll just say one more thing. In Pakistan, many people, and by the way, here as well, massive kind of protest uprising, not Shias, in fact, primarily Sunni. So it's beyond sectarian, and that's what actually threatens rulers. But the one thing that they're saying here is that, thank God, former prime minister, very popular still, Imran Khan, refused to have any military or CIA presence in Pakistan. And we should remember, they have been there forever, and especially during the war on terror. Khan said, get out, because people here are saying that, well, if we had that, maybe we'd be attacked right now as well. But thank goodness we're not.
Well, certainly. And also, I think, Dr. Harun, history has taught us many a lesson, whether we're talking about the ousting of Saddam Hussein, even in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi. And there was a very interesting piece that was written by the daughter of Muammar Gaddafi, Aisha Gaddafi, where she speaks about negotiating with a wolf will not save the sheep or bring lasting peace. It only sets the day for the next meal. And the next meal today is Iran.
Yeah, of course. It's a lazy argument. It's form of cognitive dissonance, but to go down the route of sectarian divide, Sunni Shia. It's a very lazy. We move way past this a long time ago. And what many of these ulama bodies and other body states in the Gulf do not realize is that if they're successful with Iran, they are going to move one by one to those Sunni Arab countries in the region, because ultimately it is about the Greater Israel Project, and which encompasses, we've been over this, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. I think maybe one or two more. So they are merely delaying the inevitable right now, or trying to hold on to their illegitimate thrones by assisting the Americans, and those bodies who are now go down the lazy route of just blaming this on sectarian divisions cannot see further than their noses, to be honest, because the Sunni majority are going to be next should they are successful with Iran. So we need to move beyond this. Support for Iran is not a theological support. Okay, support for Gaddafi wasn't a theological support. Support for against the war on Iraq in 2003 was not theological support. It was political support. okay, that this is qualified support, because ultimately, once they're done with this country, if we are going to give the green light to Iraq, to Iran, to Afghanistan, soon it's going to be UAE, soon it's going to be Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and so on. So we must necessarily have that foresight to understand and not fall into the sectarian divide, that this is more about, greater Israel and Israel first, and we need to resist that. Support Iran, not just support its theology if you don't want to, but support it because they finished with Venezuela, they're going after Cuba, they want to finish Iran. It's about neutralizing the global south to ensure the dominance of white supremacy, to ensure the dominance of the Western world, because it has been in terminal decline. And this is an effort to arrest that, to try to address that terminal decline.
Yes, Dr. Harun. Taufeeq, I know you've, early on you spoke about the economic consequences, and we've already starting to see a lot starting to play out. The oil price, the Strait of Hormuz, very, very strategic. We've heard Donald Trump talking about a naval escort through the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm not too sure whether he will succeed or not, or he's just being delusional.
$150 million children around the world are orphaned, facing hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. With Islamic Relief's Orphan Sponsorship Program, you can provide a child with access to education, nutritious food, essential healthcare, and a safe home. Your sponsorship is not just support, it's hope, security, and a brighter future. Be the reason an orphan child smiles again. Sponsor an orphan today with Islamic Relief.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Elite Basmati, available throughout the Middle East, and now for the very first time exclusive to South Africa. Brought to you by Murchison Spice, Pietermaritzburg's most famous specialty store. Elite Basmati, available in aromatic white and golden cellar, is packaged in a world-class facility in India and is filled with wholesome goodness for your well-being. Elite Basmati rice by Murchison Spice. For trade inquiries, contact Mohammed on 033 387 2121. Murchison Spice.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
The usual Donald Trump that we've actually come to know as well. But clearly this has got grave economic consequences, not only for the world, but if we can even just cite the United Arab Emirates as an example. And, the entire world obviously itching to get into Abu Dhabi and into Dubai. And today we see this country come at a standstill.
Okay. With regards, I was actually going to bring up the Strait of Hormuz in terms of the oil trade. And we must also draw back to the kidnapping of President Maduro and, well, basically the motive is actually oil and the petrodollar. You see, America is going under a very financial crisis right now, so they must do something to actually, balance the scale. So I think these desperate moves actually, and then with regards to the second thing you actually mentioned, can you just repeat the second thing?
I spoke
The
about the
second,
Strait of Hormuz, and I spoke about Dubai, about the
yeah,
economic.
all right, okay. With Dubai, you see, what nobody's actually mentioning is the proxy war. And the proxy war need not look in isolation, just the Middle East. We need to look at the proxy war in terms of Africa as well. And America has its proxies throughout the world. And if you look at even like, well, I'll say it outright that India-Pakistan conflict, India is a proxy of America as well. So, and then we actually go down to take it one step further and go down to the BRICS agenda. The BRICS agenda actually plays a major role in what's actually going down between and what's actually, well, basically Trump's behavior now is actually what can we say? It's a strong arm tactic into nations, into strong arming them into economic leverage. We can say, well, even in South Africa, we have our factors at least. We can go into detail at that if you wish.
Yes. From today, let's just look at America internally. Now, since Trump has taken office, we know a lot has been taking place. And, the Epstein files, everybody knows it's been a major talking point as well. And that obviously has huge potential of bringing the Trump government down. It actually did at up to a certain stage became a major talking point. And internally for America and American domestically, I mean, we've also heard that well over 50% of Americans are anti this aggression that America has now gone against Iran. They are concerned what this is going to do to America, what it is costing America. We're talking of billions of dollars of military hardware and equipment against cheaper Chinese, arms and missiles that until now Iran has been using as well. And this obviously is having a devastating effect and impact as well. And to the extent we've even seen people like Mamdani issue very, very strong statements against this aggression. Where does this leave America internally, considering that Trump has been a power unto himself? He hasn't gone through Congress. He's issued unilateral tariffs against countries. We see what has happened with Spain as well. Spain has refused America from using its airspace. We've seen Trump retaliating by threats. All of this playing out. Where does this leave America internally from a political perspective, but also in terms of a superpower, in terms of how America is now being seen both internally and the rest of the world?
Well, brother, this is, I think, one of the key issues in this entire war on Iran by the United States and Israel, the internal issues confronting Donald Trump. We should remember that this is the first time in the entire political career of Donald Trump, his first 4 years and now his second term, in which you have seen a dramatic decline of his popularity. Because this guy has always been able to be this con man and fool everybody, and he's popular. So this is the first time we've seen it go dramatically down. And of course, the immediate catalyst for that has been the release of the Epstein emails, but also even before that, the Trump idea of MAGA, Make America Great Again, increasingly has been seen by its base as MEGA, Make Israel Great Again. All of the promises, I mean, inflation continues through the roof, and now the final nail in the coffin of whatever support Trump had is this war on Iran. This is the president that had won the first time and this time on the basis of being opposed to these forever wars waged by his predecessors, Bush, Obama, and so on. And now it seems he's more than willing to get into that. So I think that one of the interesting developments, as we've all probably been following, is the internal civil war taking place within his own party, within the Republican Party, and especially his base, the MAGA base, again, which had no idea, I mean, in defense of that base, of the very cozy relationship between the United States and Israel. And during the genocide in Gaza, it became very difficult to conceal that. So you have this internal, civil war going on. Trump specifically, I think that how we need to see Trump at this particular point is this. I mean, he's always been transactional. He knows this is his last 2-3 years. It's full on corruption, transactional relationships with whether the Gulf regimes and so on and so forth. I mean, you see this. Everything becomes an issue of real estate. The political problems of Gaza and Israel, Palestine, it's about real estate. So this is what Trump has been up to. I just want to say, so we have to realize kind of there's an immediate cause and there's a long-standing cause behind what's going on in Iran. The immediate one, as everyone has been saying, is that complete Zionist control and their objective of the Greater Israel Project. Because we should think about that. All of these Gulf rulers, from whom Trump himself personally and his family, getting billions, if not trillions, yet still the Zionists and Netanyahu won that battle. It's an interesting, that's a very interesting thing. The other thing is not to let the empire off the hook. We all know that since 79, the United States, through sanctions, proxies, all sorts of sabotage, has wanted to get rid of the Iranian government. And so these two converged at this particular point. The other thing I just wanted to quickly emphasize is that in the midst of these Gulf countries protesting against the Iranian missiles, and the country of Bahrain, host of the Fifth Fleet, is a very interesting run. We're not hearing much about it, though we should. There's literally like a revolution going on right now. Mass protests. In fact, it was quite embarrassing for the government. They welcomed the missiles. And you see the Saudis going in Bahrain, just like the what happened during the Arab Spring, to suppress that. So these are some of the issues that are going on. And just because the Pakistan angle, I mean, I think I'd be remiss not to emphasize it. And brother, you had also mentioned it at the beginning. One thing we have to realize is whether it's Turkey or Pakistan, whatever regime they have, and God knows I despise the current regime in Pakistan, they also understand that Israel is going after basically any power in the country that can put some type of formidable threat to it. Iran was the most obvious one in its support for Palestine, but so is Turkey and Pakistan. Pakistan, fifth largest country, sixth largest military, nuclear armed. So as much as Trump will guarantee to Pakistan, hey, we're all in the same, the Pakistanis don't trust the Israelis for good reason. The issue with Afghanistan has been the following. I mean, this is the incredible paradox of history. During the War on Terror years, every government in Afghanistan, of Karzai, Ashraf Ghani, and the Americans would say what? Pakistan is harboring these Taliban terrorist characters that come across the border and commit these acts against us. The same claim Pakistan, ironically, is making today. The Taliban in Afghanistan are harboring TTP and other terrorists that come across the border and attack us. The point I'm trying to make is that we have to kind of move beyond this immediate reaction to kind of Afghanistan. This is the larger context. These forces have been groomed for decades, and that is what Pakistan is dealing with now. Its proxies going rogue.
Well, certainly the case. Dr. Harun, in the absence of decisive international law, with a UN Security Council and other international bodies impotent, and they have been for a very, very long time. The key issue here is looking at it from an Israeli perspective, the Zionist entity. We've heard Netanyahu has been very, very quiet in the last few days as well. But also at the same time, what this is doing to Israel's society. And the reason why I'm asking this question is we know that even with Gaza and the genocide and what had taken place a few months ago with Iran and the missiles that were fired into Israel, and we see that they are still obviously causing a fair amount of damage in Israel. These are people who have got a place to run, because this is exactly what they do. The moment they come under attack, they run. They leave for Germany, they come to South Africa, they'll go to Greece, they're going to go all over the world. They're going to run away. Iran,
no, of
at this
course.
point in time, Iran has got absolutely nothing to lose. Iran has got their country. Just, how determined do you think are the Iranians in the absence of international law being able to do something about it? How determined are the Iranians to hold on and take this thing as far as they can?
Yeah, for the Iranians, and I mentioned this in an engagement with the Iranian ambassador last night to South Africa, where I stated that, this is a war to the end. It's either Iran repels these threats permanently, the US and Israeli threats, and repels being where the US and Israel are no longer a threat to it, or this is going to be the end of the Islamic Republic. This is an existential war for Iran, the existential war for the Islamic Republic and the revolution of 1979. So Iranians have now nothing to lose. They had warned the Gulf countries that should they come under attack, they're going to attack the American bases. And the ferocious nature of their retaliation and their response shows that they viewed this as an existential threat. So Iran has nothing to lose. The Israelis will flee. We know during the genocide in Gaza, up to 500,000 fled to European countries, many to Russia and other European countries, because they hold second passport, and the majority of those didn't return. The Iranians have they have nowhere to go. Their passport is very weak. They have nowhere to go. So they realize that this is the existential war. They are fighting to the end. However that would pan out, they will be fighting to the end. This is an existential war for the Islamic Republic of Iran. They understand that. I simply hope that after this is all done and dusted, that they will pursue a nuclear weapon, because their biggest mistake that they made in the last 47 years was not to pursue a nuclear weapon. We know why North Korea it doesn't come under attack, because they have nuclear weapons. So Iran, to avoid an existential threat in future, needs to pursue a nuclear weapon, because now they negotiated in good faith in June last year. They came under attack. They negotiated in good faith now in February. They came under attack. Why do they keep negotiating? This should be the end of negotiation for Iran. It's because they have nowhere to go, and this should be a fight to the end.